Which fats to use when cooking is important, as some fats, when heated, produce toxic substances, as well as some fats may even contribute to heart disease. What I'm about to share with you now is controversial, so be ready to have your jaw drop, and let's get started. Not everyone wants you to know the truth, so I'm here to expose the science and share practical tips on weight loss, fitness, and healthy lifestyle. It's simply put, with no BS. Make sure you're subscribed. I'm Ingunn, the Norwegian Viking. So, what makes some fats better for cooking? Well, they are more stable, so they don't oxidize as easily. That's both while being stored, while being heated, and also inside our body. We'll get back to that. Now, there are three different types of fat. You have saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, and polyunsaturated fat. And if you haven't already watched my video on saturated fat, I highly recommend that you do so, because we have been misguided now for decades. In short, there's no real evidence it's bad for us. And actually, as we'll discuss a bit more later in this video, polyunsaturated fats might actually be those that you would want to limit. Now, how these fats are categorized has to do with how many double bonds they contain. Carbon atoms can bind to other atoms in 4 different places. We can think of the carbon atom as having 4 different arms or hands, and it really wants to hold hands with different other atoms. For the most part, within a fat molecule, carbon holds hands with the 2 other carbon atoms and 2 hydrogen atoms. In some cases, there aren't enough hydrogen atoms, so some carbon atoms end up holding 2 hands together, and that's what we call a double bond. But the carbon atom would very much like to hold hands with other atoms, so this makes the molecule more unstable and more reactive, and they can end up being oxidized. So double bonds means they are more unstable. Saturated fatty acids do not contain any double bonds. Monounsaturated fatty acids contain 1 double bond, and polyunsaturated fatty acids contain 2 or more double bonds. So where do we find the different types of fat? Well, all foods that contain fat contain all 3 types of fat, but in different ratios. When it comes to foods that are pure fats, like butter or olive oil, those that are high in saturated fatty acids are those that are solid at room temperature. The exception would be things like margarine that has been made to be solid at room temperature, but also then contains something called trans fatty acids, which is really not good. I'm not going to go into that in this video though. We'll take a look at the different types of fat in different cooking fats shortly. For now, the more unsaturated a fat is, the more unstable it is, and the more easily it can oxidize. And fats are more easily oxidized when heated, like for instance when we're cooking. So why is oxidation bad? Well, for one, it can result in some bad flavor and bad smell, though that's really not the most important thing. It may also reduce the nutritional value of the food, as oxidation of fats, the process of oxidation of fats may also co-oxidize vitamins such as vitamin A and carotenoids, vitamin E and vitamin C, and thereby impair the nutritional quality of the food. The oxidation process can also produce harmful substances. The oxidation of unsaturated fatty acids results in significant generation of dietary advanced lipid oxidation end products, which are in part cytotoxic and genotoxic compounds, meaning it can be toxic to cells and also damage our genes. Now, some of the studies that I've seen look at fats that have been heated for hours at a time, so that doesn't really apply to us when we cook at home for just a few minutes in a frying pan, for instance. Though we'll talk about why you may want to avoid fats high in unsaturated fatty acids anyway shortly. Also, even though you may not cook an oil for hours at a time, it's still very important when it comes to, for instance, restaurant food or other ready prepared foods, which may have used oils that have been cooked for or heated for long periods of time. For instance, in fryers, like fries, Plus, the fats don't require heat in order to be oxidized, so they may still be oxidized even while being stored. Now, what I think is the most interesting part of this is that polyunsaturated fatty acids may actually lead to oxidized LDL, which is a predictor of heart disease. LDL is a kind of package that transports lipids like fat and cholesterol within the bloodstream. LDL has gotten a bad reputation because it's believed that high LDL can cause a buildup of plaque in the arteries, which can lead to heart attacks and heart disease. But one study found that nearly 75% of patients hospitalized for a heart attack had cholesterol levels that would indicate they were not at high risk for cardiovascular event, meaning they did not have high LDL. And it's now said that oxidized LDL may be a much better predictor. Part of LDL may be saturated fat or unsaturated fat, and it's now believed that unsaturated fat, or specifically polyunsaturated fats, which we have seen are more unstable and can be more easily oxidized, may lead to oxidized LDL, and thereby possibly leading to a buildup of plaque in the arteries and possibly heart attacks and heart disease. So is that what's really going on? We're going to look at a jaw-dropping study, though first make sure you subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications, and remember to also follow me on Instagram at VikingIngood. Now check out this study. This study looked at how changing dietary fat intake may affect the level of oxidized LDL as well as lipoprotein A, which may also be a risk factor for heart disease. The study lowered saturated fat and monounsaturated fat and increased polyunsaturated fat, and found that oxidized LDL increased, as well as lipoprotein A. For decades now, we have been told that saturated fat causes heart disease. So in order to prevent heart disease, we need to limit saturated fat and rather substitute it with polyunsaturated fats. However, as this study found, in conclusion, we found that a diet traditionally considered to be anti-atherogenic, meaning low in saturated fat and high in polyunsaturated fat and naturally occurring antioxidants, increased plasma levels of circulating oxidized LDL and LPA. This is the opposite of what we've been told. Remember to watch my video on saturated fat as well as red meat if you haven't already done so, because what we've been told for decades now doesn't really have a real basis in science. So when it comes to cooking fats, we want to avoid those that are the most unstable, meaning those that are high in polyunsaturated fatty acids. And looking at which fats actually contain the most polyunsaturated fatty acids, this makes sense as well, because those high in polyunsaturated fatty acids are those that are man-made and hasn't really been around for more than a century. So they are not really a natural part of a human's diet anyway. So with all of this said, what are the best fats for cooking? Well, mainly animal fats like butter, tallow or suet, which are beef fats or fats from cows. I wouldn't necessarily use lard because due to the way pigs are fed these days, they may actually contain a lot more polyunsaturated fatty acids than they normally would based on a natural diet for these animals. When it comes to plant fats, I would suggest those that are naturally more fatty and has been through the least amount of processing, and those that we have naturally been consuming for long periods of time. Like for instance, olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil, possibly also palm oil based on its fatty acid composition. And here are some of the fats that I try to avoid as much as possible, though sadly, because they are cheap, they're very much used in packaged foods as well as in restaurants. And that's pretty much it. It's not only about the fats that we cook with, it's about the fats that we consume in general. And I'll be talking more about this in other videos because it's that important. Also when it comes to weight loss. And speaking of weight loss, make sure you download my free guide called Hack Your Way Out of 3 Weight Loss Mistakes Almost Everyone Makes. As we've seen in this video, as well as other videos, there's so much we have been told that isn't really based on sound science. So if you're ready to make use of science in order to lose weight, make sure you start with this free guide. You can download it now at vikingingun.com. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I would really appreciate a thumbs up, a heart, or a like, depending on where you're watching from, and I'll see you in the next video.